Was that the bite of it?
There's a weird trend just now occurring within filmmaking and the movie industry, and it's one that is not necessarily brand new. It's happened before, but it is weird to see the large amount of success that has come with it. And I'm saying it's weird, but there's a clear answer to why the success has come, and I'm quite excited to talk about it today. Of course, I'm talking about YouTuber movies, which are not a new thing in any way, shape or form, but it is weird to see them break into the mainstream and people actually watch them and not just ridicule them to death. And I did say this isn't a new thing, and that's true. I've been around, I know what I'm talking about. I was there on the front lines when Fred 1, 2 and 3 all premiered on Nickelodeon, watching them early in the morning with my parents sitting there going, holy fuck, that guy's annoying. I was also there when the Smosh movie came out, and again, just an awful piece of shit. And honestly, who could forget the long list of awful teen parody, comedy, whatever you want to call them, films that came in the late 2010s, which were just like abysmal, and the worst part is there's so many of them, there's no point in being specific. Some frequent faces that would show up are people like KSI or even Logan Paul, and who could forget the Fine Brothers. Oh, also completely forgot to mention the Shane Dawson movie Not Cool, which he won a contest for. Used to love that movie, haven't watched it since I was a kid. I imagine it may not be as good as I remember. All of that aside, it is so interesting to see the landscape right now of YouTuber films within the 2020s. There's been a wide amount of younger YouTubers who have tried to take a stab at filmmaking, and mostly they are going in the genre of horror, and it's so detached from their personas as YouTubers that honestly, calling them YouTuber films is kind of redundant, no? The movies themselves have absolutely nothing to do with their personas online or what they are personally known for. It really is just people kind of coming forward and being like, we have this original idea that we really want to put out there and we want people to see, and for the most part, they have been great. I'm not going to talk much about Raka Raka's films. Talk to Me is one of my favourite horror films of the 2020s, and Bring Her Back, although I did not appreciate it as much, has a lot going for it, especially with that Sally Phillips performance. Then who could forget the long anticipated Chris Stuckman debut last year, Shelby Oaks, which left people on either absolutely ridiculing the man to death or people trying to defend him because, hey, he's just trying to give him his best shot and, you know, this is his dream. My opinion on it is, I still haven't seen Shelby Oaks, so I'm not going to bully Chris any more than he clearly already has been. I understand being a filmmaker can be hard, but at the same time, just because you try your best doesn't mean you're always going to make something great. That being said, the one bit of criticism I can give Chris, not related to his film, is if you're reviewing a movie on YouTube, something like Wicked perhaps, maybe you should not have the whole video more or less be an advert for a gambling site. Just throwing that one out there. All of that aside, there is 3 films that have been released this year that all have been directed by former YouTubers. They all delve into the genre of horror, and they have all been pretty high successes as of right now. Some of these movies are significantly more recent than others, so obviously they're still finding their footing in the box office, but I mean, none of these are failures. They've all kind of made their money back, I think. Maybe with the exception of one, but one of them is also significantly smaller. And I would just like to talk about all 3 of these movies because there is something very creative and ambitious about all of them, and they all kind of have something worth talking about, even if they're maybe not all on the same standard as the others. So to set things off, I feel like it's only right to talk about the one that kind of had the world in a chokehold for a very brief moment in time.
Calculated risks. Eden doesn't understand that. You don't understand that.
Iron Lung is a very, very independent science fiction horror film written, edited, directed, and starring Mark Fishback, also known and more frequently known as Markiplier. The movie is an adaptation of the 2022 video game, which I have no experience in. I've never played it. But I can say after seeing the film, maybe I'll give it a try. From what I gather, the film adaptation is fairly faithful to the video game. They kind of get a lot of it on the nose, with the plot following a convict who is forced into a submarine known as the Iron Lung, as he has to go through an ocean of blood on a moon following this huge apocalypse that happened. It caused all of the stars and habitable planets to disappear alongside a lot of human life, and basically he's just swimming about this ocean trying to find more things that they can use to rebuild. First things first, big props to Markiplier himself, because From what I gather, this was primarily financed by himself. He released it himself. He, well, seemed to do everything himself to some extent. To star in, write, edit, and direct your debut is very, very fucking ambitious. I would not wish the burden on anyone. I have attempted to do such things, and it's not as easy as maybe some really pretentious people may lead you to believe, but this is really impressive for someone to do all this on their own. That being said, the movie itself kind of is a bit of a mixed bag. First things first, I want to get my biggest criticism out of the way, and it's one that has kind of been repeated throughout everyone on the internet, which is, you can hire an editor, man. I understand the perfectionist in some people, that they really want everything to be done by themselves because they have such a specific vision that they want to make sure gets across to everyone. They have ideas that maybe they don't trust other people to get by, so they decide to take the job into their own hands, and sometimes it works great with someone like Sean Baker. But with Markiplier doing this for his debut feature, this movie's way too fucking long. I like the environment and atmosphere that the film spends a lot of time building up. It is a very slow burn to begin with, and I appreciate that a lot. It sets you into this world very slowly, like, this is the situation, this is what's going on, this is the environment that we're currently in. It sucks. But as the film progresses and we learn more and more about the character and more things occur, there's kind of a mindset of, okay, do we really need to see more condensation in the submarine? I genuinely do think that a editor could have cut this down to maybe 90, 100 minutes long, and it would have benefited the story a lot more. It wouldn't have felt as much of a drag as it does when it gets to a point of being a little too repetitive, especially for someone that is not familiar with the game whatsoever. This is my introduction to it, and although I am still eager to give the game a go, I was kind of sat for a little bit like, fuck me. We're really kind of walking in circles a little bit here. Another slight criticism is that Mark's performance leaves you kind of wanting a little bit more from him. He is trying his best. You can tell he's giving 100% most of the time, and it leaves a little bit of an impact on you. You feel the stress of this character of Simon that he's playing, how much you do not envy the environment or situation that he has gotten himself in. But there is certain parts of the acting, or maybe it's the script itself, that just feel a little bit lackluster, where you're just kind of watching a guy screaming, trying his best to show a little bit more emotion in his face, specifically of crying, and it doesn't always get 100% of the way there. If I'm being honest, I never really watched Markiplier's videos growing up either, so it's not like I have a huge attachment to him as a person or anything like that. I think he seems like a lovely guy, maybe, I don't know, but the emotional attachment for me as a person having a bias towards him just isn't there. I will say that the fact that this was self-financed and everything, it is very impressive to see how it did so well at the box office. I swear at one point it was outgrossing Send Help, which is fucking crazy in today's landscape. And although the achievement is incredible, and I'm gonna sound like a bit of a dickhead here with what I'm about to say, he has a large fan base, so of course the film was going to make quite a bit of money. It kind of makes sense in the grand scheme of things. I do still think it's a large achievement what he did, but also with a YouTuber that has 10 million subscribers, you kind of have to imagine that the people are going to show up at least a little bit. It's kind of like the same reason why Logan Paul and KSI's drink Prime was so successful. It wasn't because it was a tasty, good beverage. It was because there was these two big losers attached to it. And of course, their young, impressionable fan base are going to go out there and buy whatever their names is attached to. That being said, very happy for Mark. Very great achievement. He did an okay job with this. I would have liked maybe a bit more of a team to come in and clean it up a little bit. I think if that had been done, you would have really had a really fantastic film. If you like it, that's cool, but for me personally, I just kind of was yearning for a little bit more from it at times, and also a lot less at other times. That being said, Iron Lung was not just the only YouTuber horror film to release this year, obviously, because there's still 20 minutes left of the video. So now I get to talk about one of my favorite films of the entire year.
No, don't do that! I thought we were having a nice day!
We are.
Why does it matter? I thought we were having a nice day!
Obsession is written, edited, and directed by Curry Barker, and it follows Bear, a normal everyday guy who has a huge crush on his best friend Nikki. One day he comes across a one-wish Willow and wishes for her to fall madly in love with him. Of course, this results in, well, things just don't go very well. Is it just me, or did Obsession just kind of come out of nowhere? It was like one day I'd never heard of this movie, like ever, and then all of a sudden it was my most anticipated thing, and I just couldn't wait to go and see it. Now, it may come as no surprise that this is now one of my favourite films of the entire year. I think Curry Barker has such a very distinct voice throughout all of this movie, and could very well become one of the most interesting people working in horror, full stop. First things first, I should probably repeat the point that everyone else is making like a broken record. Indy Navarrete is... holy shit. This is one of the, like, an all-time horror performance for me. Not even, like, of this year, just genuinely one of the best and most terrifying performances I have ever seen on screen. There is a unpredictability about the way that she plays the character of Nikki throughout the entire thing. You really have no idea where her character is headed next, despite the fact that the story follows a fairly simplistic plot. Guy makes wish backfires, hijinks ensue. The performance of Nikki by Indy is truly something to behold. It is one of the things that carries the entire film, for me personally. Although it's not just her performance, there's many different elements that also complement it. For example, the way that the makeup is done in the film, specifically in shots that are slightly darker than others. There's one specific one that has been going around for ages with the film being released, of the way that they contoured her cheeks to look sort of thinner, and also blushed up her eyes so that they would appear so much more predominant in those shots, despite how poorly lit they were. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way, I just mean they were dark. The way that makeup really adds on to the horror of her appearance throughout, it really adds that level of anxiety to you as a viewer watching. Not just this, but I also mentioned the lighting. When I first saw this, I was kind of in the same boat of where I was with Weapons, where I really loved it, but the lighting just didn't always work for me. Some things were way too dark, and over time I have thought about that more and have realised the intention and use behind all of that. The way that these things are dark are not done just to try and keep things very freaky, although it certainly helps. There is so much purpose behind the lighting. It makes certain things in the scene pop out. Specifically with the character of Nikki, there's many scenes throughout where the lighting is almost too dark, but you can still kind of feel something, a dark presence sitting in that room peering out at you. The way they have done this with her eyes, there's one shot that is just absolutely stunning to look at, and I imagine they had maybe contacts or something in her eyes, because the way they sort of pop out at you in the screen, they feel so predominant, but also like they're staring straight through into your soul, almost as if the person you're looking at isn't really there, which fits a lot into the theme of the film. It does a very great job of leaving a lot of things up to the audience's imagination with this character. There's one or two specific scenes where it almost feels like we get a glimpse of the real Nikki inside this shell of a person she's become due to the wish. And it's the type of thing that you would kind of expect, but the film does help a little bit to be like, yeah, this is really her, without telling you that it is really her. There's screams of anguish and begging for death, more or less. It's fucking deeply unsettling. At the core of this, it is such a very cruel film. There is no real happy ending or solace for any character. Everything just really goes awfully, and it really boils down to the greed of this character, Bear. In doing this wish, he takes away all of her free will, her humanity, everything that he maybe thought that he loved about Nikki, even though deep down, I think as the story goes on, it becomes more apparent that he didn't really love her. It was more of he loved the idea of being with her, or at least that's my interpretation. And throughout this, there's many scenes where he has the option of giving up control and maybe, realizing that what he's doing is absolutely fucking wrong, and on the verge of a word that I probably can't say on YouTube because I'll get demonetized, but it rhymes with great. This guy's a fucking rapist. He constantly plays victim throughout, and it really, I had no sympathy for him at all. I spent a lot of this film feeling both terrified of Nikki and her unpredictability of where she might go and what she might do, but also just this deep feeling of remorse for her and empathy and sympathy, because you really just feel awful for this character that is, my perspective anyway, is inside the head of this fake Nikki, just banging on the walls, begging to be let out or to be killed at this rate. Despite all of this, There is plenty of comedy hidden throughout this movie as well. I understand that Barker comes from a background of sketch comedy, and again, not familiar with his content, but the comedy really shines. I've seen people on Twitter arguing that it's not a funny film. There's plenty of stuff to laugh at here that is, at least to me, so clearly intentional behind a lot of choices, but I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. Of course, that leads us on to the final film of the three, the one that the internet has been raving about since it was first announced all those years ago, and one that, well, it really had a lot to live up to.
Ahoy there, mateys! Now, according to me map, we've landed on the crystal shores of a bountiful land, a land filled with great deals.
Backrooms is directed and co-scored by Kane Parsons. It follows the owner of a furniture store as he discovers a dimension in the basement which leads to a wide array of liminal spaces and rooms that seem to go nowhere. Kane Parsons, as many people will probably know at this point because everyone seems to never shut up about it, including myself, is 20 years old. He is the youngest director that A24 has ever worked with. At the time of recording this, he is the youngest director of all time to have a #1 film at the box office, and this is probably going to become A24's highest grossing film of all time. I feel like Backrooms is not something that needs all that much of an introduction. If you're very much online, you're probably familiar with it to some extent, and also just genuinely it seems to have made its way into the mainstream very highly throughout things like TikTok and Reddit. People are obsessed with the lore and the backgrounds behind it. Personally, for me, I watched some of Parsons' Backrooms short films and thought some of them were very cool. I like the way that he made them primarily through Blender. I think that is like really cool. It's kind of like Flow last year. It's just, once again, showing that animation can be done in such a very cool and unique way. But all of that aside, how is the movie? How is the movie that everyone has been going on about for so long? Is it good? Is it bad? Well, I have my problems with Backrooms, but all in all, it is a very enjoyable and refreshing horror film that clearly has a lot of artistic value behind it. There is clearly intention throughout many of the decisions, and it is one that to be honest, I'm kind of looking forward to rewatching. To get the obvious stuff out of the way, the production design here is absolutely fucking insane. If it doesn't get a nomination, they're smoking crack, because it's so insanely impressive what the team has done here. It really shines out. It feels so real because, well, they built most of it. There's the stories of people getting lost in the set. I don't know how true that is, but it is very cool to see all of that. The score and horror elements also work incredibly well. Constantly, whenever anything is taking place in the Backrooms, there is this sense of dread and uneasiness that comes with being in there. You're constantly kind of on edge. Every time someone turns a corner, not expecting what's going to be on the other side of that. It is very consistently scary until it isn't. I went to see this film with someone who thought that the movie was very boring, and I can understand that maybe this isn't for everyone, especially people that are going to see it and don't know anything about it. There is a lot of time spent building up tension, building up environments, learning about our two main characters of Clark and Mary, who, again, two great performances. Chiwetel Ejiofor and Renetta Rensby, you know, they are two actors that have proved time and time again that they are great, and I think there's so much more credibility that comes with a film like this, having two very high-profile actors that typically wouldn't be known for something like this being in, like, almost internet slop. It feels hurtful to say that. It's not for the most part, but that's where it comes from. It's a 4chan thing. It's a Reddit thing. Those two websites don't exactly have all the respect in the world. 4chaners don't come from me. My issues were also never with the pacing or the environment. I think it captures a certain era of the internet that is long gone at this point, back in the 2000s, early 2010s, when the internet was still this whole mystery, specifically YouTube as well. As much as you have people nowadays trying to get into making money by exploiting children or exploiting YouTube kids with AI and stuff like that, there was a time where, for the most part, the only fuckery that was going around on YouTube was people just trying to scare people. Stuff like this and Slenderman and Jeff the Killer. The birth of creepypastas that really is something that doesn't hold the same weight anymore, that there isn't as much fear. Maybe it's because I'm older now, I don't know. But it captures that era of internet so well. Parsons clearly knew what he was doing with all of that. Like, he has a deep understanding for all that sort of stuff, and it comes across in the film. It delivers that eeriness that it really needed. My main issue comes primarily in the second half of the movie. The first half spends a lot of time building up tension, explaining everything, and that's all great. We get used to the environment of the Backrooms, but the second half for me gets a little bit too showy, if that makes sense. I liked the ominousness of the movie going in and not really knowing where anything was going, but at a certain point there is a scene, if you've seen the film you probably know what I'm talking about. There is a scene where everything tries to get wrapped up to some degree in a nice little bow. They're not trying to explain everything, but they're trying to make sense to you as a viewer of what's going on, and for me personally that is where it took things out a little bit. I liked not exactly knowing what was going on and using my own brain to piece together where the story was trying to take things, try and make sense of all of the surroundings and the entities that seem to be fucking kicking about in here. I didn't like how the film kind of placed it all into a box. This is this thing and this is why it does this and you can eat this guy. I would happily watch more of these as well if they came out, especially if Parsons is behind them. I think he really has a greatness that can be discovered throughout these films, and maybe over time as he gets more experience they can be even better. In fact, I'm saying that none of my issues really come from anything he had to do with it. I just think that the script could have been swapped about a little bit, maybe not held the audience's hand as much as it did, but all in all it's a pretty great time. So is the YouTuber to filmmaker pipeline even real? Kinda. I think it's very cool that these sort of people can go out there and make these sort of movies. I think it's great to see new voices come in and show that they actually know what they're talking about and aren't just making things with their IP stuck on it for the sake of making a couple bucks. Like Smosh. I like Smosh now, so I'm not gonna be so hard on them. You can be a YouTuber and make a movie now. There's so much more less stigma around it as internet culture has made its way increasingly into the mainstream and people have maybe a tiny bit more respect for what these people do. I'm not talking about influencers, I'm talking about actual filmmakers and video makers and people that have ideas. Although they are YouTubers, that doesn't really matter in these sorts of films. They aren't making these things to boost their egos, they're making them because they had a cool idea and they wanted to execute it. The fact that they're YouTubers really has nothing to do with any of it. So to answer the final question, can a YouTuber make it in the film industry? Of course they can. Deep down, I think anyone can. As long as you're not trying to do something like, oh, I don't know, not cool. Thank you so much for watching this little video talking about 3 films that, you know, vary in quality, but all in all are pretty decent times. I would highly recommend checking out all 3 of them. I think there's stuff to love and hate in all of them. Except for Obsession, that might be a masterpiece, I don't really know. But definitely check them out, voice your own opinions. If you have seen them, let me know what you think down below. If you loved them, you hated them, you thought they were mid. And I will see you in the next one. Thank you again for watching.